Right, so I want this to be a proper tippy video, in that I've made it very, very clear that over the past, probably 18 months, nearly 2 years now, waggler fishing has been my obsession, just through the nature of matches that I'm fishing in the summer, and definitely getting beat by that Andy Plowell bloke a couple of years ago. It's made me reared me on to make my waggler fishing better. And what I want to do is just go through I want to go through 3 different areas, 3 different points that need looking at, that have made my waggler fishing so much better by looking. So same with every type of fishing, looking at the finer things in detail, making them, as far as I believe, as good as they can possibly be, or the best of my ability to. That's what's just probably made me that 5–10% better than I ever was in the first place of doing it on waggler fishing. Probably about 90% better, because I weren't too good at that, if I'm honest, a few years ago. But yeah, so I want to go through the 3 key points. So that'll be the line, wagglers, and the actual feeding, and the difference it makes for me, and hopefully gets me a few more bites than I used to get in the past. The first point, like I mentioned, is focusing a little bit more on my line. I mean, it's something I was massively guilty of, just thinking, heavy as possible, get job done. And I was using, I was using like 6 and £8, or £8 if I'm honest. I was using I can't remember what it was, but I was using £8 for a lot of me fishing, just for the durability aspect. And if I'm honest, in so many situations, it's completely wrong. Do you know what I mean? It was affecting me casting. It was just not right. So focusing on a little bit more on line, mainly diameter, if I'm honest. Do you know what I mean? Strength, pay a little bit of attention to them, but it's all diameter for me, using the right diameter of a line that you trust. It transformed everything in the way that I could cast so much better. It just makes, fishing nicer in general, the lighter line that you can fish. And definitely what I've had to do is to gain confidence in using, £4 line. That's basically what I've been using. I've got some there for posing purposes, using £4 016 in the right situation with the white wagglers. Just makes everything a million times better. Yeah, so whenever I'm fishing, the £4 would be whenever I'm fishing foam wagglers, a lot of situations with mugging wagglers, just because it allows me to be so much more accurate. It comes off the spool so much nicer, and it's just nicer for casting. It just makes everything better. As long as the situation's right for using that. Like I say, for me, £4 is what I use these days for me little foam wagglers, for me mugging, little intimate venues where I've not got to pull the heads off away from snags, and I'm not really catching millions of fish. If I'm fishing for 10 fish, then £4, mainly mugging is what I'm thinking of in that situation. Allows me to pick off them 10 fish, whereas I may be hindered if I was using something a little bit thicker that didn't cast as nice. When it comes to actual fishing a proper pellet waggler, that I'd call it, where you're feeding lots and lots of bait, bigger venues like maybe Larfordish, Boddington, that would be the key venue that I'm thinking of. Even big places like this, we're at Bonehill today, and can be quite an aggressive venue if you get a bit of wind and you want to feed some bait. When you're moving up to the bigger wagglers, your crystal-y type wagglers, your balsa wagglers, stuff with a lot more weight to it, when it's really important to keep a tight line, that's when I move up to £6. That's only moved up 0.2, so I'm 018 with that one, but it just gives me that bit more durability, so I can proper crash them big floats in all day, and I'm much more likely to be catching lots and lots of fish. But playing about with the 2, having the right one for the right wagglers, it's definitely made a big difference. Catches me 1 or 2 more fish than using something too heavy would. It's more fish in the net. It's only ever going to be a winner for me, paying a bit more attention to the line I'm using. So next, there'd definitely be pretty much the most obvious one, and that's choosing the right wagglers, and actually getting hold of the right wagglers, which could be quite a tricky thing as well. But gone are the days, definitely, when one pellet waggler or one type of waggler was what you used. You got your pellet wagglers out to use them. That there's so much more to be thought about with the actual waggler, just to determine how you cast it, how it lands, what impact it has on the fish. And so you've got to pay attention to all them sort of things, just to make sure you're using the right waggler for the right situation. But pretty much the way I can sort of break it down, so like willow fluff everywhere today, is there's sort of 2 ways in that they behave for me, in that it tends to be on the calmer sunny days, just like it is today, you tend to want minimal splash. Subtlety is everything. That's the best way of explaining it, in that my waggler wants to go in as nice as possible without upsetting them fish. That tends to be the best on the hot still days when they're a little bit wary. And then secondly, it'll be the angry days when they want to feed lots of bait. It's really got a bit of a wind on, things like that. Then you can use your heavy wagglers to do the right thing. But what I want to break down is that the three sort of types of wagglers that I use for me different situations. So first up, and probably the most common one that I'm using, is my little foamy type wagglers. If we let's grab 3 of them so we can see. Let's grab another one of them. So your typical foam type wagglers, and these are probably the most common wagglers that I'm going to use these days, because in most situations for the venues that I fish, I mean smaller venues, like where am I thinking of, Hayfield, where there's often not too much wind, the Glebe maybe, you know, nice places where they're not really affected by wind and so too much on most occasions. A foam waggler for me is the best, simply because how it goes in. I mean, it goes in so much more subtly. It's fishing pretty much a lot quicker than any other waggler because of its buoyancy. It's straight in and straight up, and so there's much less chance of it spooking fish. So for me, my foam wagglers, they both come into me feeding when I'm feeding a bit of bait. I'm not feeding loads, just pinging a few baits out and fishing around my feed and within my feed. And also for me mugging, that's where my foam's going to come in. It's also where, going back to the line, they're my 4-pound line wagglers, where the sort of the lightweight of the waggler needs to be aided with a thin diameter line to help it cast as accurately as possible. So they're me babies, if I'm honest, that I use most of the time. Let's go on the complete opposite end of the scale. Let's go with the balsa ones first. Again, when I mentioned the line sort of things, when I'm going to move up to my 6-pound line at the bigger venues like Boddington, Boston, when it's got a wind on, again Larford can be on Spessy Lake, that's when you want to be moving over to your balsa type wagglers. Yeah, wagglers that have a lot more weight, that are generally 6, 8, maybe 10 gram on a nasty day. Maybe they've got a lot of weight to them that allow you to really cast it in any poor conditions. They allow you to present your bait better when there's a wind or a tow on, just because you've got more weight holding it in place. And really, really, really importantly, they help you keep a tight line between the end of your rod and your waggler. I mean, they're so much better with a bigger, proper waggler for chucking it out there, getting into your routine and getting the fish to hook themselves, because there's a bit of weight and your line's tight, which is massive. So they're the wagglers that I'm always going to choose whenever it's, you know what I mean, I keep using that word, sort of angry. I mean, whenever the weather's a bit bad, I'm being a bit more aggressive, and I'm catching the fish on the splash and they're hooking themselves, they're the wagglers I'm going to choose for that. So lastly, and a bit of a weird one, I mean, I don't find myself using these wagglers as much, just because there's a real limited frame for me when I like using them, and that's my clear wagglers. I think there's some Keith Easton ones that he did me a couple of years ago, and I struggle to find that the perfect use for all of them. And for me, the clear type wagglers, for me, they've been so much better when the fish are deep. I mean, I've been playing about quite a bit, again, Hayfield, them sorts of venues, and whenever I find the fish are 5 to 6 foot, then I tend to find that the long clear wagglers are so much better, just because of the stability, I think, more than anything. You find that your foam ones and your balsa ones, they're more of an instant pellet waggler, that it's going straight in, you're getting a bite, or you're twitching it, getting a bite. It's fast and furious. Whereas at the odd venue where you can hang your baiters, if you like, where you can put your float out there, feed to it 3 or 4 times, and then you're getting a bite, I just find these so much more stable. Probably just the length, if anything, because they're a little bit longer than the normal type wagglers. The added length, and probably the stability with the way that they're loaded, I suppose you want to call it, yeah, not shotted, loaded, just helps them stay in place that little bit better. So I can feed in the same place. I'm not chasing my waggler all over the place. Gets me a few bites. But say, looking at them pretty much 3 types and using them in them 3 situations, I've got something to cover absolutely any different day that's going to arise. Hopefully I've got a waggler that will be right for that sort of situation that I want to fish it in. So firstly, when it comes to how you feed, I mean, I'm all about keeping it as accurate as possible, which means not pushing it. I mean, the biggest mistake I see is people feeding with the catties as far as they physically can. And because you're doing that, because you're pushing it to its limit all the time, you find that your bait spreads and you're inaccurate because of it. All you need is a bit of a wind and you're messing about. Instead, I'd much really feed at a comfortable distance, drop 5, even 10 meters shorter than the maximum that the catty allows. And it allows me to group those pellets so much better, because honestly, paying attention to every sort of catty that you feed, I mean, not doing it rushed, watching how many pellets go in, feeding it nicely, making sure they group as accurately as possible, I mean, puts more fish in my net, because it keeps them fish on a tighter surface, just makes them far easier to pick off. instead of having random pellets falling all over the place, that the fish will naturally pick off them instead. They definitely work out if you're feeding badly and pick off the stray ones because they know they're safe. So that's the first thing for keeping things accurate. I don't want to go into amounts of pellets because that changes on the day. I mean, it's all about every single day you want to feed in different ways, maybe little and often, maybe raft it, who knows. The next thing would be for me though is the routine that people get into. And a massive mistake again that I see is people casting out and then immediately, literally, they chuck out. We're gonna have a little chuck. So I've chucked my waggler out. And as soon as the waggler's out there, people are picking the catty up to feed. Yeah, in 99% of situations with a pellet waggler, your bite is when that float's landed. So just don't be in a rush to immediately get your bait out there as soon as your float's landed. I mean, you do not need to. You're much better just being patient, have your cast. I mean, give it 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then feed some bait, then switch your float into it, and then maybe try and get it so you're feeding before you cast in. So what the normal routine I like to get into is I'll cast out, feed over the top, so then switch it over the top. I won't feed until I've had probably 10 seconds of fishing. Switch it into that feed again, reel in, and then cast as quickly as possible after that second lot of feed. So you're sort of chasing the back end of the last cast. That's the usual routine, although you might mix that up a little bit depending on what's happening. But yeah, definitely not being in a rush to feed straight over that float as soon as it's in the water, because the amount of time you see catapults flying because you've had a bite as soon as that goes in, so it's something you do not need to do whatsoever. Just hang back, let your bite happen, and then feed and let them fish respond to your feed instead of panicking at what's going on. So for me, that's pretty much it. So that other than maybe casting around your feed, I mean, looking for fish, whatever else that needs to be done with a waggler, so the basic tips that I've gone through are what for me have made it a little bit different, managed to take things to the next level by focusing a little bit more detail on doing things in the right way or the right order or whatever else. And so it's definitely transformed my waggler fishing, and hopefully a few little tips could help you as well.